like he teaches me, you know what it's answer as if we're in a bar drinking a beer.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't want you to be anybody else except you. And I want you to be the real and authentic you. And I want you to be personal, meaning, tell me real shit. And, if it's a fucked up story, that's okay.
Okay.
Right. Because that's how we grow. That's how we learn. So
Mhm.
let me start with a real softball. We'll bring in the hardballs and with, as we go. So tell me your proudest moment, not in your career.
I really believe that life is a journey. I think I was well raised by parents who taught me not to have regrets. And so I have become a pretty quick decision maker, but I trust my gut. I'm one of those people who, once I've made a decision, I don't find myself reflecting, oh, I wish I had done this differently or that differently. So I'm very proud of the people that I put around myself, and family is a big component of that. Through that, I've done things that I never would have thought possible. I like to try new things. From gardening, metalwork, woodworking, but it's fun.
So I was sitting with a friend, and we closed this huge deal with Qualcomm, right? And I took him to a very expensive dinner, and there was like jellyfish like swimming in the middle of the restaurant in this like water column.
Uh-huh.
And I tell him, "Oh, that's beautiful. Is that the sunset? We were on the sea looking, and it's like, oh, that's the east or is that the west?" And he says, "No, Ari, that's obviously the sun is setting, so that's the west." And then I say the following sentence to save grace. I'm like, "Oh, where does the sun set in the east?" And then he looks at me, and I won't say the name of my employee. We're now great friends. I helped him get
Uh-huh.
his next job. I'll tell you that story too. It's great. So he's like, "Nowhere, Ari, nowhere." this guy
Nowhere.
works for this guy works for me, and I pay his salary.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I knew we had become friends for life.
Right.
Um, so and then I tell the story to my mother, and she says, "Well, Ari, you're not the brightest, but at least you're good looking."
Right.
I'm like, "Thanks, mom. Thanks, mom."
Mom moments are perfect, right?
Look, she's South African, and like it's not, there's no mincing meat, there's no niceness. It's like you're good looking, like that works for you. So
Play with your strengths.
there you go, perfect stress. So,
That's
like, that's the
good.
sun does not set in the east. Like, I'm not sure, like maybe on a different planet where the Earth, where whatever planet turns in a different direction. Like you go there, Ari.
That's
So
a good story.
so much, as I said, the camera was shaking because I was writing so violently. But you said you don't have regrets.
Right.
Okay, that's like everybody has regrets.
Yeah.
So I need you to explain to me this. Why don't you have regrets?
So I think regrets and looking back and saying the path not ventured or the decision made, but looking back saying, gosh, I really wish I had taken that job and regretting it. I don't, so I'm very genuine when I say I don't regret because I never go back and say the woulda, coulda, shoulda and spend time dwelling on it. Like if we really were in the bar right now, I wouldn't be crying in my beer going, gosh, I could have bought more shares of Xerox and sold at this price, or gosh, I could have done the Google thing at the time. All those little things in life. I think things happen for a reason and in points in time. My college career, I thought I would have a certain type of major. I thought I might go into the FBI or the Secret Service. That was the path I was on. Had a back injury and surgeries at a young age. So I completely, it was okay. I'll go into sales. It was something I knew I could do, and I've never looked back and gone woulda, coulda, shoulda of like this regretting because I
No,
had
that.
back problems since the age of 20. It is a learning moment. I think it makes me kind of mentally tougher. It's like everybody goes through crap. You typically don't look at someone and go, gosh, they have this or that. And I think that's why leaders commonly have to kind of listen, because listening not only with their ears but with their eyes and with their sense and knowing what's going on in a room. Some of the best meetings I've actually best business relations I've ever had, I've actually stopped meetings. I remember I was meeting with a high level prospect at one point, and I was just watching him and I could tell something was wrong. And I said, I don't remember his name, won't use it on this, but is everything okay? Is now still a good time to meet? And he said,
Yeah.
no, I just had a family member who had this diagnosis. I really think I should be there. And I said, stop everything. You call me when you're ready to meet again. We're done. I don't need to waste your time. You don't need to waste time. I left. It was about a week later.
Wow.
Yeah. But
Wow.
everybody, hey, Jeff, like that really took, whatever. It was like, that's just being human. Right. And I've had the same thing
Jeff,
with,
Jeff, let me stop you right there. Like, that is special, that is unique, that is not common. And I will tell you, I spoke to people, there is a dog coughing, like almost, keeling over, and they just keep doing their thing. And so
yeah.
like, Jeff, I need to stop you and I need to say that, I love your humility, but let me say to you, that is amazing. Absolutely. Let me ask you this, okay? So,
Yeah.
so you said well raised, right? I,
Yeah.
I'm a dad. I got three kids.
Yeah.
They're young. What does well raised mean?
Well, you know what? I would probably age myself by saying I probably different generation than today.
Yeah,
My parents certainly the school of they had a job to do and I had a role to play in that. So
yeah.
their job was to make successful adults, not be our
Amen.
friend. Like
Amen.
I love my parents. They're knock on wood, fortunately still alive. Still have the
Amen.
benefit of getting
It's
to spend
wonderful.
time with them and use them for advice and guidance.
It's
But
wonderful.
also, I don't have that type of relationship where it's my dad's my best friend or my mother's my best friend. That wasn't the relationship. So, like when I say raised to learn, raised to look someone in the eye when you're speaking with them, sit up straight, the little things, table manners, but it's the table stake things, the home training that you get in a lot of different cultures. And I'd say I benefited from that, but also that hard school of my dad shook my hand when he dropped me off to college and said, if you get
Yeah.
yourself into jail, you have to figure yourself how to get out of jail. And my
Well, hold on,
family,
Did you get yourself in or out of jail?
I never got arrested. No, I may have done stupid things as a young
That's
man
fair
in
enough.
college,
Fair enough.
and but no, never arrested, never
Okay.
anything like that. Never had to do that. But I also would say pushing. My parents had a rule that we couldn't live within a certain distance from home, so we couldn't go home and do laundry. We
Right.
couldn't, come home on a suitcase. So it was about going off and being in an immersive experience where we learned both, a new culture, new friends, but how to be an adult. And I would say that is probably so well
Amazing.
raised. I think I just was well raised in the sense of both manners, but also I do have a level of self confidence that I attribute all to my parents.
I think that's absolutely amazing.
And it
That
ain't
that is
easy, right? So I would say you said, father of three. I would say you have to be, like you said, being honest. And I think
right.
that's like it's kind of thinking about that
It's
honest,
not.
transparent, be the
Yeah,
person you
it's
are at
not.
home as you would be in the workplace, but also
Yes.
you want your kids and your friends to be that way. And
Yeah.
you surround yourselves with people like that, right?
Yeah. No, as and we make mistakes, right? Our parents make mistakes, and I remember having this conversation with my eldest, and I said to him, "Look, I'm a human being. I shouted at you. That was a mistake. I misunderstood the situation. I lost my temper. That's not okay. That is not okay. And this is the moment that you learn that your father is not a superhero. He is a man who makes mistakes. And what my superpower is to recognize my shortcomings and apologize to you and tell you that I make mistakes, you will make mistakes, and learning from our mistakes, that's the superpower. I learned that learning from your own mistakes is important, but we all are told that. But actually, there's a secret sauce. There's
Mm-hmm.
two more ways you can learn from other people's mistakes. And
Yeah.
that is incredible, right? That's something that I was taught by Linda Genzel. She's an incredible professor in the University of Chicago.
Okay.
Um, and learning from other people's mistakes, that's amazing. And the third thing that I learned, right, and this is obviously through observation, etc. But the third thing I learned is that you can't really learn from your mistakes without writing it down. So I learned that you need to write down what you thought before you made the decision, and then
Mm-hmm.
what you learned or what you thought after making the decision. Compare the two, That's incredible because then you see, well, your memory of what you think you thought. And that's
It
amazing.
always does, right? And no, I think that's a very big piece of it. Like reflecting on it and
That's right.
trying to actually work through it is really that good piece of it. That's why I think deep dives in both good and bad situations, especially in work environments with
Yes,
teams, because like you said, you learn from yourself, but you also learn from others. Is being able to walk through an environment, have an environment and a culture that you can discuss, hey, I made this mistake. I think the military, especially different types of military units, do really good work with it. Like SEAL, Special Forces, where they have that extreme ownership concept. And, it's not about mistakes, right? It's about what are we going to do about it and how do we make sure that mistake,
that's
A,
right.
doesn't become fatal next time, but also we learn from it. And I
This
think,
this is such an important topic. Okay, so what you're talking about is this idea of organizational culture, which leads to
yeah,
hyper growth, right?
yes,
So what this is about is that if you're afraid to make mistakes, you're going to hide your mistakes. You're not going to take action. And I had a boss who was really a mentor to me. He said to me, "He who does not do does not make mistakes."
yeah,
So explain this to me. What's your philosophy around, and more than the philosophy, because I think the audience
yeah.
is getting it, but how do you change culture? How do you let everybody understand that there is a culture of learning from mistakes, receiving feedback, and all those good things?
I think one of the proudest successes in my career that I'm most proud about is working with people in diverse cultures. So I've been able to do that with really big corporations like Aramark and Xerox, but I've also done that in very smaller companies like Humatic and Marquee. And when I really get to the core of that is when I started with Humatic, they're a Swedish-based company operating it at the time in 17 different subsidiaries. I was brought on to lead the Americas part of that business as CEO, managing director, but it operated in 120 different companies. And
Wow,
that culture was different in all 17 different operating
amazing,
countries, right? So, like learning the culture,
amazing.
how do I do that personally? When I first met with the CEO and the board and they were hiring me, I was told, Jeff, we're Swedish. So a lot of the culture is collaborative. That means there may be times where it feels like you can make the decision, but we all want to talk about it. And we all want to at least feel like we're part of that process. The other
Yes.
part is we want you to make mistakes. So go out and make mistakes. Don't make the same mistake 5 times in a row. And I'll never forget when Michael Holiday
There it
said
is.
that,
There it
right?
is.
Right. But 5 times in a row. And
The
I was
same,
thinking,
well, but the same mistake, right? That's
right. And
key.
it was the same mistake. It was go make
Yeah,
mistakes.
not
And
the
I
same
remember
mistakes.
very simply, Ari, just recently, during my interview process now, I had someone who said, well, you'll never make mistakes. We're looking for a leader who will never make mistakes. And at that point, I really liked the opportunity kind of to it. And I said, I don't think that I'm the right fit
That's
because
right.
I do learn from mistakes and I do
That's
make
right.
mistakes. I can't say I'm ever going to make the same mistake twice,
That's right.
but I will make new mistakes. And
That's right.
whether that's misjudging an employee, maybe
That's right.
misjudging a situation, there's a lot of little mistakes we do on a daily basis, right?
That's right.
But I would say that learning culture and then understanding the culture as it exists before you get
Yes.
involved in it is
Yes.
so crucial, right? You can't go in.
Absolutely.
So I always like to say there's the due diligence phase, then
Yes.
there's kind of the absorption phase, the learning phase as a
Yes.
leader, and then there's when you can feel like you start tweaking it. But when you start to tweak it, building in that toll gate or the ability to retweak it, right? So it's always
Yes.
easy to go here on
Yes.
paper. This is the greatest new organization we're ever going to do,
All
and here's
right.
what we're going to do. And then you go launch that, having the ability to go, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have made these changes in these
Right.
three locations. It won't work there
Yeah.
because they have a slightly different culture, right? Because a Swedish company who felt they had a global Swedish culture, you
Yes.
went to France, they believed everything had to be in French. Everything it
Yes.
was a very
Yes.
French culture, so they weren't selling as we're owned by a Swedish company. We're a French company who
That's
happens to
right.
have a Swedish product,
That's
and
right.
there's the quality. But in the U.S., it was we have Swedish quality. Think Volvo. Think all these things.
Yeah.
Very good product. But we're an
Yes.
American company, so building that culture globally is really important. And like you
That's
say,
amazing.
building it. I like to say it's communication, and then the listening, right? So like good organizational cultures come from how you communicate and bi-directionally,
The
because you got
listening
to
is
listen to
key,
those
right?
involved in it,
It's
because I've been
amazing.
in so many different cultures where it's three or four different levels of the same culture,
Right.
and it's always a little different, right?
Yeah.
What it means to me is always a different thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think that a lot of people don't have the emphasis that you do on listening. They think they get it, and they don't have the ability to rethink. And what rethinking, if you're familiar with the literature on this, it's the ability to basically say, was I right? Did I get this correctly? Do I have all the data? Were my assumptions correct? And I think that's such a fundamental concept. By the way, I would highly recommend that our audience goes and reads the book. It's wonderful, this concept of rethinking. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of my stuff will come from my two favorite heroes, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, and then all the derivative work. I'm going to say a Nobel laureate right now is a derivative work of that, but yeah, not just a little bit derivative work. Richard Taylor is great. I studied with him, but yeah, I think the greats is really Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, which unfortunately Daniel died last month, which
Hmm.
is a huge loss to humanity, I think. But that's amazing. This concept of rethinking and examining your biases, amazing stuff.
And it's
Oh man,
I do find it's constant work, right? Because I
yes,
do really think I'm a good listener. My wife is excellent coach and mentor, because she sometimes says you're not a good listener, right? And then how do you rethink, right? But like you say, it's sometimes it's not listening in the moment. It's like listening. You wake up
that's
in the
right.
middle of the night, and I've had these moments where, yeah, the very next morning I call, whoever I was working with the day before and say, you know what, I really kind of, you said this and I did this, right? Like I
Right.
immediately jumped to the problem solving. Did I give
That's
you
right.
enough time for us to explore it the way you wanted to?
Yeah.
And I've learned that like that does not always, especially when your time frames, end of the quarter, all
Yes.
those little
Yes.
things, it's so easy to become
Yes.
the problem solver, right? And
Thank
one of
you.
the hardest things, going from an individual contributor role to a management role, like,
That's
is
right.
relying on the people that now are, feeding you, right? And one of my good friends, he we were sales managers together at Xerox, and they're my idiots, they're no one else's. So if you call them an idiot, we're gonna have words.
We're gonna, yeah.
But I can say to
Xerox is the
you, you
Xerox
won't
has the
believe what
smartest
these people
people.
did today. But
Yeah,
like learning from that and being able to get that, because you eat as a manager, especially in sales, you eat from what everybody else kills.
right.
You're no
That's
longer
right.
out there with the long gun killing every day. So it's up to you. Like, have I given them all the right tools? And I
That's
get
right.
back to that extreme ownership. Like, if the team fails, it's because of something that I didn't enable them with. And so what do I need to do to get better? Because yeah, I
Right.
wasn't in the field when it
But
didn't
Jeff,
go
you've
right.
answered the most important thing about how do you change culture. You give a personal example. You show people that it's okay to make mistakes and you tell about your own shortcomings and you fix it and you show that there's no harm, no foul by going through
Right.
self-improvement. I mean, Jeff, I have goosebumps. That's amazing. Like, no, really, that's genuinely great. I unfortunately have known leaders that are not consistent in their behavior and they're kind of great for the first 3 months and then they have a mental breakdown and the real thing comes out. And that's incredibly concerning, right? Because
Yes.
it means that they have to be on their best behavior to give this consistent behavior of like, I would rather you have been a dick on day one. At least then I would have known what I'm dealing with, right?
Right.
Um, but I
No,
mean, that kind of,
consistency over time. I think that I like the way you just said that, Ari, because consistency over time, I think we've all experienced, at least I have, is that leaders who, you join with and you're, wow, I'm just
yes,
like, I love working with this person. And
yes,
then, that first pressure quarter or pressure event and things slightly change. And then, it's a little crack, right?
yeah.
And I've had the benefit mostly of working with really strong leaders, but I've had that challenge as well. And I always try to, like, that learning from others, like, what would I do differently in that situation? And
Yes.
sometimes you say, I probably wouldn't have done maybe everything differently, but
Yes.
maybe I would have communicated differently, or maybe I would have tried something different.
Jeff, you are an absolute delight.
Well,
I
thank you.
no, I look, I'm a kind of an asshole, right? Like I'm the guy who will tell you up front that I'm a little bit of an asshole, and I will be the person. I told my wife she made an amazing lunch, and we had guests over, and I
Mhm.
and I pointed out that wasn't as good as it is normally, right? That's the level of asshole I am because I believe that transparency and good feedback is really important. So I will give that kind of feedback, and it will be blunt, and it'll be in your face. And yeah, I'm South African, and it's a cultural thing. Um,
Yeah.
but some people will call that I'm an asshole, and that's okay. I accept that as part of who I am. Um, but this thing of like consistency over time, that's huge because I'm consistently an asshole and the same type of asshole. And if you fucked up, I'll be like, hey, like that wasn't good. This was great. So when I give feedback and I say this is an absolute delight, it's real because I
Yeah.
will tell you when you do something wrong, right? And God, nobody knows that better than my family because with them I have absolutely no shame.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the concept of
Yes.
and cultural consistency,
Yes.
but that self-identification to it, because like I've had the benefit of leading teams of leaders all over the world, right? And leading a team of people in Sweden, people in the Netherlands, Germans, English, and then
Yeah.
Northern European, typically as
Yes.
direct or as even sometimes as black and white as you can become.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
this way or it's that way
Extremes.
and
Yeah.
extremely direct.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you have a team that I had three leaders: Italy, France, and Spain.
Oh my
Southern
God.
European, a lot
Yep.
more emotional.
Yes.
Yes, the meeting was supposed to start at 1 o'clock. Yeah, lots of, kind of like me. I'm very, I do talk to with my hands. But I know the meeting started at 1 o'clock, but we weren't done with the cigarette break. We weren't done with this. We were,
That's right.
like it's a rolling starts like NASCAR.
Right.
But very emotional, like empathy
Yes.
leadership. And one of the,
Yes.
I learned a lot about the true meaning of empathetic leadership through some of my people that I've really had the benefit of working and spending time in France, Italy, and Spain, because it is about, yes, sometimes we would say, did we need to spend 2 hours drinking coffee and just chatting, or could we have had the meeting? But some of the things that come out of that 2 hours was culturally much more important than anything else we could have done in the kind of
Yeah.
let's get down and renegotiate the contract or let's
I,
go do
I would
this.
argue that long lunch, right, or wine, I would say that is the negotiation of the contract because when I evaluate
True.
partners, I'm evaluating, not the T's and C's. I'm evaluating their family. I'm evaluating,
Fair.
how they carry themselves. I'm evaluating their consistency. I'm evaluating how they treat other human beings. And I would argue is that as you get to know each other, you build this magical thing called trust.
Yes.
And if you have inconsistency, or if you don't trust other people, that means I can't trust you. I think
Very
that's an
fair.
issue, right? So I think lack of trust, these kind of paranoid, behaviors that are like, sure, if somebody treats you bad, you should be like, okay, either you decide not to work together, and that's okay, or you decide, okay, we work together. You screwed me. Next time I'll screw you. Like that's business, right?
Right.
You
No,
screwed
it's a
me.
great
It's fine.
example because you remind me of someone I used to work with, and one of the tactics or observational points that interviewing, especially managers and more senior
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
part of the feedback loop. It wasn't just the people that
that's right.
interviewed the
That's right.
person. It was the person at the receptionist desk. It was
Yes,
the
thank you.
admin.
The
When they
Mollys of the
walked by, did
world.
they say hello? Did they smile
That's
at
right.
you? Like you say, you go out to lunch or dinner with somebody. How do they treat the wait staff?
Yeah, thank
Like,
you.
are they nice to the wait staff?
Thank you.
Are they personable? Because if
Thank you.
they're nice to you, it's one thing. They're kind of, you could be like they're sucking up. But if all of a sudden they're really mean to the go get me a cup of coffee and don't look at me or this coffee's horrible, I think that's a reflection, and that's something that's really important because I always do that. Like if someone spent even 5 minutes, hey, what'd you think of Ari? Oh, he was really nice to me, or he asked me personal questions.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great. Or oh, he asked about the culture here, and I told him what I thought. Oh, great. And that
yeah.
gave me an opportunity to go, well, what'd you tell him about the culture?
I love that. I gotta do a shameless plug.
Sure.
So I have a friend. Her name is Karen Eber.
Okay.
She has a book which I listened to the whole thing in one sitting. It was on 1.5 speed, so like it was faster, but one sitting. And the book is called The Perfect Story. It's by Karen Eber. That's Karen, and then her surname is Eber. It's got a
Okay.
green pencil, the green pencil of hope, if you're familiar with the color green. But that's a different topic. So in her book, which I
Hmm.
listened to in one sitting, she talks about, and I think it was Molly, right?
Hmm.
And Molly is that person. They were like, "Oh, what's the name of the receptionist?" Now, if you don't know, this was a professor who
Right.
gave the students a test or something, and they were like, "Oh, what's the name of the cleaning lady or something like that?" And her name was, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, Molly. And there was one question, and if you got it right, you got 100%. If you didn't know that name, you failed.
Okay.
That was the test. Now, I hope I'm not mixing my stories, but go read the book
Okay.
and tell me if I didn't mix it with somebody else's story. But that book is absolutely amazing. Um, Actually, we'll have a speaking event with Karen soon. She'll be speaking in front of one of my communities. Um, happy to extend an invite to you, Jeff, to join. That would be wonderful.
No,
Um,
that'd be great.
it's critical, right? Because if you don't care genuinely about the person at the reception or the cleaning lady, like, why should I believe that you're going to care about your employees? Why should I believe that you're going to care about your stakeholders? Why should I believe that you're going to care about your customers?
Well, and I think it's all with Story Samurai and tying it all back together. For me, what was impactful and powerful so far has been it's the stories we tell ourselves, it's the
That's right.
story we tell our
That's
others,
right.
and it's how we tell our own story, right? And that's what I've always said. Like what kind of employees do you not
Right.
like working with, right, or find challenging? The ones that lie to themselves are the ones that I find
Oh
the most
Lord.
challenging, right?
Oh
Because
Lord.
I people who lie outwardly, sometimes it's different, right? It's like
Yeah.
I don't want to admit a mistake, maybe our
Yes.
culture's not right, but when they're lying to themselves and it's driving the
Give me
behavior.
give me a juicy fat story. No names, no companies. Just give me the story. I want to hear the pain. Like, what were you dealing with? What was the story? What did the
Well,
employee do?
I can think of unfortunately a few of them, but especially as a sales leader or as driving global sales, you're relying on large deals. Typically you're managing via a CRM. You're deep inside a Salesforce or whatever tool you're utilizing. You're doing updates. As a more senior leader, especially in diversified organizations, you may not be day to day involved in the deal, but
Yeah,
I happen to, especially on large deals over a certain size at most
of
companies,
course.
involved in is there anything I can help? Can I
Yes.
be helping in any executive way?
Yes.
Let me understand the strategy, next steps, what's going on. Um, Honestly, in this situation, we were getting all the good news.
Yeah.
We weren't getting any of the bad news, right? Like true
Uh,
decision making process. So it was
that's a red
always,
flag.
well, and it was, when will you follow up? Well, I have a meeting next week with them.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, long story short, wasn't having the next step meetings, but wasn't reading the signs and wasn't able to really communicate outwardly and didn't really have anything else prospecting. It was a very large deal,
Right.
so, top 100, Fortune 100 company. So it was a make you or break you kind of
Yeah.
deal. Um, but when you're not able to really understand when, hey, I'm dealing with a director of something,
Yeah.
and you start to get questions from Jeff Green or an Ari who says, well, is there anybody else involved in this decision making process? They're pretty big. Hey, I was just on LinkedIn and I saw that so and so, I have a connection over there, maybe I could talk to
Right.
them. Nope, they're making the decision all by themselves. It's just all about budget. And then all of a sudden the deal goes away, and they really, well, it's just because of price. Those were that. So it's that's not the real story, right?
And they
So
truly
that,
they believe that. Like that's
no, they believe it to their core, right? They believe it. Like you guys are just too expensive.
so that's wow. I have no words. You mentioned mentally tough, right? You were
Yeah,
talking about your parents and growing up and being mentally tough. I call that grit.
great.
Um,
Yeah,
would you
which is a
would
great
you
book. Duckworth,
Yep.
Angela Duckworth.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I was going to say, great speaker too. She spoke
Uh,
at a conference that
oh,
excellent.
would you argue that this lack of grit it causes victimism, where they are basically a victim? It's not me. I have no control. I'm the victim. Our price is too high.
Right. I definitely think it can. I think both grit can be both systemic, so it can be environmental, and it can be like team culture, because
Yes.
a culture can quickly fail, right?
Yes.
People genuinely like to be part of winning teams, and I've been kind of muddling this concept in my brain of, can you have a highly performing team, like a winning Super Bowl team, without a good general manager, or and vice versa, right? Can you have an excellent management team without performance?
Yeah.
But you really have to have both to achieve. Like, you look at some of the greatest teams ever and then defining what great is, right? Like, I'm a
Right.
Chicago Bears fan. Yeah, the Super Bowl in 85 didn't
Yeah.
necessarily have the greatest quarterback, right? Didn't
Yeah.
necessarily have the greatest, offensive line,
Yeah.
had the greatest defense potentially of all time as a you can argue whether Ditka was a great coach or got greatness out of players,
Right.
and the same thing, but all of those ingredients together got that team. And I think the
Yeah.
one thing you
That's
can
right.
honestly say about that team, getting back to grit,
Yeah.
is they had a combined level of grit, right? Like,
That's right.
everybody
Yeah.
had that same DNA of, we're going to do whatever it takes to be the best. And you look at
Yeah.
somebody like Jason Kelsey, who just retired, and I read a lot of his excerpts and things that he didn't come out of, necessarily the greatest program. And he wasn't, you read the press, in the NFL draft releases, right? Like, they didn't expect him to be potentially the greatest center ever.
Right.
I think that guy has grit, and I think grit is very
Yeah.
important.
That's
I
right.
think
That's right.
nurturing and culturing as a leader and a coach and mentor is important to keep someone's grittiness level up,
Yes.
because it's easy to get ground down a little bit. And, like on those deals, and that's why, that fine balance of not taking over a deal, because I would say I'm a pretty darn good salesperson, and I was a
Yeah.
good individual contributor. I've
Yeah.
always been a better coach and mentor. So I moved into management because I got better results, but I enjoy it a lot better. I actually like being
Me
behind
too.
the scenes
Me
and
too.
not, the quarterback.
Me too.
It's kind of fun to be able to say, "Hey, try this, try this, try this," and then we'll try that differently the next time. But all that gets, I like your element of grit. I think it's really important, but I do think there's that coaching, that constant practice component of grittiness.
Yeah. So this employee that I was talking about
Mm-hmm.
before, the same one that, told me, I already know the sun does not
Yeah.
set in the east. Um, he was a hardcore engineer, and I told to him, look, I'm gonna make you into a salesperson, one of the best.
Okay.
And he was like Ari, sales is icky, you know, like, because he's imagining, right, the door to door. He's imagining the sales cars,
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, I'm gonna teach you something that I've personally coined as relationship driven sales.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna teach you now, maybe I coined that phrase, maybe I didn't, but you get me one on the concept, right?
Right.
And I'm gonna tell you how sales is all about building trust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so we went through this process, and I got to tell you, like yourself, I enjoyed the elements of mentorship more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So he went from being a engineer coding to selling millions of dollars to Qualcomm. Now, he so happened also to do the development and all that, but he closed the deal.
Yeah.
And that's and after he was started small, right? He was closing
Mm-hmm.
first one I think was $60,000, then he closed 100 and something, then
Mm-hmm.
he was closing $250,000 deals, and not just
Right.
with Qualcomm. And they trusted him. Qualcomm, like, oh shit, like these guys are doing cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
They trusted this guy, right? Because he's awesome. And I'll tell you the surprising thing: nobody wanted to hire him. Nobody wanted to hire him. And then when he left, Siemens, I was like, if you ever need something, you give me a call. So he called me up and said, oh, I need a reference check. I'm like, okay, no problem. So the reference, the manager calls me up, and they start
Mm-hmm.
talking, how they did, blah, 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 blah. Stop. If anything goes wrong, here's what's going to happen. I am going to write you a $5,000 check right now,
Okay.
and you will deposit that check if anything doesn't check out, and if he's not the best hire you've ever had. You deposit my money to you. I hired him on the spot. He came back to me, and he was like, what the hell did you tell them? I just got hired. And they were like, and he works there, and they love him,
Yeah.
right? He could not get hired. He
Yeah.
told me nobody will hire me. I think that's all right. That's huge. So I want to go a completely different direction.
Okay.
Um, FBI, Secret Service.
Yeah.
We gotta go there. Like, I think the audience is like, go back to that, Ari. Like, what's that about?
I was a
Sorry.
young man, but who doesn't want to go into the, take a bullet, do that kind of thing.
That's not important.
Okay.
What is important is the why. Why did you want to do that?
So I had the benefit of some of my friends and schoolmates growing up through high school. They had parents in the FBI, and I had some level of exposure, and then just had the opportunity to research it, and it just seemed like I don't know. I was never
Don't
really
give me the
interested.
bullshit answer. Give me the answer from your heart.
No, no,
Tell me the
I was
truth.
never.
Why did you want to go to the
I thought there
FBI?
was absolutely something noble about serving the country. I think
Yes.
there's whether it's military. I didn't. I really didn't see myself going into a military branch. I saw myself going into FBI or Secret Service and serving at a high investigative level. The investigation part of it and certainly the protection part of both jobs were very interesting. And both happened to have back in the early 90s programs where you could get out of college and not have the years of military experience and you could go into different programs. And that was what I was very interested in doing. So
Yeah.
I wanted to
So
be like,
I have a hypothesis, Jeff. I think there's two types of CEOs. I think there's the psychopaths
yeah.
that are very friendly. They don't give a shit about anybody, but they come across as the most friendly people in the world, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, there's a lot of those, and they can be great CEOs. They don't have to necessarily be dangerous to anybody or themselves.
Right.
And then my other category of CEOs is the protectors. I think
Yeah.
that's what you are. I think that's what you are, and I think that's wonderful. And I'm gonna make a guess here, and then if I'm right, you tell me the story. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna guess that somebody came after your team. You told them to fuck off, and it made you angry. So you tell me that story now, if I'm right.
Well, I would say I've had more than one time where I've had to defend a team or a decision, right?
Yeah.
And I would say I don't know that I have a story I could actually tell about that.
Can you make it like no names, no anything? Just give us the general concept of what went wrong and how did you fix it? Because sure, we get angry for a moment, but then we move into fixing shit. So give us
Well,
the
actually, and you can tell me if you don't like if it's not pertinent, right? But at Xerox, I
yeah.
was a sales, managing accounts. Had a very large account. We had a situation with the account where we needed to modify their agreement. They were asking for some modifications to their contract. It was a large enough client, so there was multiple levels within Xerox that were executive decisioning. So I would call it armchair quarterbacking. And they told myself and the specialist who was assigned to me that you need to go in there and tell them this to the contract. And it was something that I knew immediately the customer was not going to go for it. The senior
Yeah.
vice president, uh, bleep his name, but he, very much, I knew this was not going to go at all. And my manager, the vice president all said, no, you need to go and you need to, go have the meeting and you tell me how it went.
Right.
So we drive over from the office. Maybe it was a 10-minute drive from the office. We're looking at each other. My colleague, this is not going to go well, but we're going to do it.
Right.
We're going to sell it. We get in this conference room. There's the SVP. There's his, our day-to-day contact. We go through this, the dog and the pony show of it. You asked for this. We heard. We listened. We're going to do this, and here it is.
Yeah.
And you can see the numbers, and he looked at the numbers, and he said, "This is complete bullshit."
I
But
love
you're
that.
telling
I love
me,
that.
you are telling me the following. Yes, sir. This is what you're giving me. Yes.
I
He
love
looks
that.
at the two of us. He closes, manila folder, and he throws it across the table. And it's like, think of the Matrix. Like it literally bounces the two of us. It goes like skimming through the two of us. Lots of expletives from his side of the table. We're like, there's like a ficus tree. If you remember those big trees in the corner, he grabs it, stands up, grabs a tree, and then throws it across the table.
I love this
So
guy.
again, Matrix, like, slow motion happening in my brain,
I
bounces.
love
He
this guy.
leaves the room. His office is right next to the conference room. So you just hear all this excellent, like, you got to be effing kidding me. You got to be this. His vice president is like, I think you guys ought to leave. I think we ought to let's calm the situation down. Give me a call in like an hour. I'll let you go know the next step. So we're in the car, Ari. We're like, that didn't go well. My colleague is like, we knew it wasn't going to go well. I was
Yes,
like, I don't
yes.
know that we knew it was going to go that bad. We go back to the office. Everybody's still in the conference room. We were having the war room. The vice president says, well, how'd it go? I said, it didn't go well at all. Completely refused to it. Okay, well, I just spoke to him on the phone. She could have led with that.
Mm,
I just spoke to him on the phone. I'm going to give him everything he originally asked for.
mm.
And I'm doing lunch with him right now.
Right.
So I'll go get it signed.
I
And
would quit on the spot. I gotta tell you, I would quit on the spot.
so, no, it was, so I'm looking at my boss at that time. She's now gone. So it's a setup, right? Like, it was completely,
Yep.
and it's kind of like, you got to take one for the team. So
Yeah.
I said, I'm going out. And so my colleague and we went to an establishment where we can get adult beverages, and we spent the rest of the afternoon. And then we did not go back to the office that day.
Mm,
I did go back to the office because I was loyal to the company. But
yeah.
what I take from that moment, so you go back to, I think, the original tenure of the question where you kind
Yeah.
of tell off, is I didn't have any respect for that leader
No, it was done.
anymore. And I always, like we talked about earlier, I never ask anybody to do something I'm not willing to do,
That's right.
because I never want to be the one that Jeff Green tells his story to in a broadcast, right? Because no, and it really,
No,
it's
that's
like
right. That's
defending
right.
your team. Like, I would defend myself and my
Yeah.
team, but again, like I said earlier, my friend Daryl and I, as sales managers, there's a lot of things people put you through in a team environment, and hopefully
Yeah.
you build a high performing team, and there are just things that you're able to do. But if someone attacks your team, like, one of my faults as a leader, especially like in business reviews, is I have this habit. And one of my mentors, Robert, will say, you need to let your team speak, don't speak for them.
I love
But it'll
that.
be like, tell me what you did last week, and I'll jump in for the. So it's something you got to learn. But it's like being the parent of your team, or you want to defend them.
Yes.
And I have that nature. I do think it's very valid for you to say, I'm a protector. I absolutely will protect my team. And sometimes you have to protect your team with information, right? Like, sometimes
Yes.
you have to be very clear in communication of, we're about to go through 6 months of what none of us are going to like, because we are trying to do the following with the company, or the numbers look like this, so we have to do a restructuring. Here's what we got to do. This part's public, this part's not public, or whatever you're allowed to share at the time. But sometimes it's a communication of the bad message before the good message. You got to get the team through. Hopefully that story worked for you. But yeah, it was
No,
one of those.
that was absolutely delightful. Unfortunately, we've all been there,
Yeah,
and we've all been thrown under the bus. We've all been manipulated in that way. I honestly, I think that's evil. Like, you should not be throwing your team under the bus for you to come in, swoop, and save the situation. Like that. That tactic should not be in your book. And I wish there was a way to identify if an executive, uses those dirty tactics. So, if anybody listening, to this has a story or has learned the method to identify senior executive leadership who pulls that shit, please come and send me an email. Tell me about this, because I want you to be be our next guest and educate everybody else on how to do that. That would be absolutely amazing. Jeff,
very good.
you are a delight. As I said, I do not say that lightly.
I appreciate that.
I will say thank you so much, and we will have to have you back again, because this is. I mean, there's like 10 things I didn't ask you that I wanted to get to. Like, so I don't
I'd
know
be
if you
happy to
can.
come back. This has been highly enjoyable, Ari. So I
I
very
have
much
this
enjoyed this. Hopefully, some of it's usable, but I would say all of it.
absolutely.
No, and I hopefully the audience as well got
Yes.
something out of
Yes.
my own little brain, right? So I
This
think
is
that's all
no
we try to
you.
do in the world.
this was a delight. I am very grateful, and I think this is wonderful, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Likewise, thank you again.
Wonderful.